Now we want the ore to go to the plant, we want the waste to go to the dump. What we don't want to be doing is sending it the other way around. And if your assaying isn't right, then that kind of misclassification can have, and that's when you're going to get slapped.
Yeah.
At the reconciliation stage of an operation. Right at the end of the program, they look at all this QC data, and that may include the blanks and the CRMs, and then do the analysis. And if there's any problems, then it's too late.
It's great to have you both here to talk about PhotonAssay, but also the geological applications of it and its impact on data quality. So what could a gold mine do to improve data accuracy and quality?
Well, I think the first thing they need to do is actually review what they've got and how it's performing. The classic way of doing that is part of their QA, QC, their QC, and particularly their duplicate sample analysis, noting that the highest level of imprecision is usually at the field sampling collection stage anyway. You may undertake heterogeneity studies, but if you do, you need to do them properly and you need to understand what you've got.
Would you say a lot of companies do heterogeneity studies, or is it something they should be doing regularly?
Sure. That's often the problem, that it's a post-program analysis, and that they spend 6 months drilling thousands of meters of core or thousands of meters of RC. Right at the end of the program, they look at all this QC data, and that may include the blanks and the CRMs, and then do the analysis. And if there's any problems, then it's too late. My general recommendation is you should review all the QC data on a batch by batch basis, and then review on a month basis. Certainly produce a monthly report.
Can I ask a basic question? I mean, what's the cost of having bad data? Because it's easy to look at the cost of, you're talking through what a comprehensive QC program looks like. I mean, there's clearly time and effort involved in doing that. But what's the flip side? If your data's under poor control, what are the downsides of that?
The ultimate downside is project value, if you just think of that in terms of simple metrics like IRR and NPV. And if you're actually a working mine, the downside is always misclassification. I mean, I've got an example I looked at a few years ago. A whole load of reassaying was done using screen fire assay. The resource was re-estimated. The resource grade was 30% higher. Locally 50% higher. We saw a threefold improvement in internal rate of return and a fourfold improvement of NPV, just because we've reviewed the sampling protocols, thought that there was a problem.
Was that enough that a decision may have flipped there from this is worth going ahead or it's not worth going ahead?
That project at that time, and we're talking about 2020, at that point, with those original numbers, that project was looking, as an underground project, it was looking marginal. And with that improvement, it was a go-ahead. That mine has subsequently gone into production and is successfully operating today at a fabulous gold price.
Sounds like from what you're saying, it's not all that uncommon.
No, I don't think so. And in some cases, the project still might look economic, and ultimately when they go and mine it, they may catch that gold. But the issue then is if they're not sampling properly and assaying properly for their grade control drilling, then their models may be misclassifying ore and waste. Now we want the ore to go to the plant, we want the waste to go to the dump. What we don't want to be doing is sending it the other way around. And if your assaying isn't right, then that kind of misclassification can have, and that's when you're going to get slapped at the reconciliation stage of an operation.
And do you have a sense of where, this sort of, I'll call it an analytical sampling breakdown happens? I mean, is it poor quality sample collection or insufficient sample collection in the field? Is it in the preparation and handling of the samples in the lab? Is it in the analysis, or is it all of the above?
All of the above, but in general terms, I would say that the highest level of error, let's call it imprecision, is at that sampling stage.
I mean, I guess in the sort of analyses that we do, we obviously tend to get involved once the materials are arrived at the lab. But how many studies would we have done now? 70 or 80 at least kind of studies. Yeah, we're often seeing not incomparable kind of splits or uncertainties associated with splitting even at the lab stage.
Absolutely.
Some of the worst case deposits we've seen variance between nominally duplicate fire assays, RMS variance 30%, 50%, 80% in some cases. I mean, it feels like one of the things that even there that's often underappreciated is, you hear time and again, you go to that final step of pulping the sample to make it uniform. But you look at the variance that you're seeing on pulp duplicates even, and they can be substantial.
The truth of the matter is once you start pulverizing, then you've got stuff happening. And I always say to people, as soon as you start pulverizing, you need to take that entire lot and assay it. Don't take 1.5 kilos and then take out 30 grams, because the reality is you're going to be in trouble.
The variability, even at the pulp level that we've typically encountered in studies, is surprisingly big. And the fact that, you know, we'll often do test work studies, we'll compare, say, 2 or 4 jars of crushed material. So for PhotonAssay, that's typically 2 kilos, recombine, pulverize, resplit them out. And it's often surprising how little improvement in uncertainty you get going from a crushed product to a pulp. You're better off sticking with as you say, measuring as much of the mass as you possibly can.
It's about bringing the nugget effect down, and from an estimation perspective, the nugget effect is, if we've got a high nugget effect, then we've got a more imprecise model. If we've got a 10 by 10 block, the estimated grade is 5 grams a ton, but we're modeling with an 85% nugget effect, we've got fairly high uncertainty on that number. But if we're doing the same block, but if the data has got a low nugget effect, say 10%, then we've got a lot more certainty on that number.
Practically, that's going to turn into you're mining stuff that's effectively barren or below cutoff, or you're not mining stuff that you should have.
At a mining level, at a grade control level, we're not getting that local estimate, because obviously once we start mining, we want our SMU, or our minimum mining unit, and we want to be able to trust that block, because we want to be able to mine it and send it to the plant. But if we're modeling with a high nugget effect, well, we're going to get a higher probability of always classification. We can't validate an individual block, but what we do is the reconciliation process during mining is that, hey, this month we've mined from here, we've put it through the plant's produced 50,000 tons at 5 grams per ton and whatever the ounces are. And we look back to the model, and what's the model? And obviously, remember, it needs to be effectively a reserve model, because it needs to allow for dilution in it.
And hopefully you don't end up producing more gold than you think you mined, because then there's red faces. But
yeah, well, that's right.
I'd prefer that than the opposite.
Probably can't mention names, but we've certainly had a couple of interesting cases where sites that have adopted PhotonAssay have seen some improvements in reconciliation, which is encouraging. It says that, I guess what you're saying flows through. You've got better control of your sampling, reduce your nugget effect, you've got better models, and
you've got something better to mine too.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And the reconciliation agreeing better.
It was interesting because they had a positive mine recon, and then when we were doing the feasibility study, we kept coming up positive, and we were like, we can't explain why we are consistently positive. And they were like, don't worry, we know exactly why you're consistently positive, because we keep getting more gold out of the plant than what we're getting in our models.
Nobody tells you that up front before you do.
No, of course not. No, you spend ages trying to figure out why you've got a positive bias on the data, but it's because you've actually measured more gold than the corresponding fire assay did for that sample.
Yeah, and then it lines up in the plant reconciliation.